Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Thucydides Peloponnesian War. Today we are on some the winter of is it the winter? Yeah, the winter of the winter of the 10th year of the war. I'm a little confused. I thought I had something, and I think I did something wrong now. Um, we're going to be starting at chapter 13, but we'll look at this. Yeah, chapter 13, we talked about the end of the death of Brasidas. Um, uh, uh, it starts out with the beginning of the winter. This is chapter 13. The beginning of the winter and his wrath of Rampitheus and his companions penetrate as far as P- Pirium in the Thessaly. But as the Thessalians opposed their further advance, and Brasidas, whom they had came to reinforce, was dead, they turned back home, thinking that the moment had gone by and that the Athenians, being defeated and gone, and themselves not equal to the execution of Brasidas's design. The main cause, however, for their return was because they knew that when they set out, the Spartan opinion was really in favor of peace. In other words, therefore, the two parties of war, Brasidas and his thing was really for the continued war, and Cleon, both the both of these, and it's Brasidas' a success was kind of saying, okay, continue this war. But otherwise, most of right now the Spartans maybe because of the holding of the Spartan prisoners. Okay, let's do this, and the Creon was the big force stopping, blocking any peace treaty. You know, um, um, so they go back, chapter 14. Indeed, as it happened that directly after the battle of Antipolis and the retreat of Rephius from Thessaly, both sides ceased to prosecute the war and turned their attention to peace. Athens had suffered severely at Delium and shortly afterwards at Amphipolis, and had no longer the confidence in her strength, which had made her before refuse to accept the peace offer of peace, in the belief of ultimate victory, which was her success at the moment had inspired. Besides, she was afraid of her allies being tempted by her reverses to rebel more generally, and repented having let go so splendid an opportunity for peace, which the affairs of Polis had offered. Sparta, on the other hand, found the actuality of war falsify her notion that devastating the land for a few years would suffice to overthrow the powers of Athens. She had suffered on the island a disaster hitherto unknown to Sparta, and saw her country plundered from Pyros and Clytia, and the Helots were deserting, and she was in constant apprehension that those who remained in the Peloponnese would rely upon those outside and take advantage of the situation and renew the old attempt at revolution. Besides this, a chance would have it her 30-year truce with the Argives was upon the point of expiring, and they refused to renew it unless Signora was restored to them, so that it seemed impossible to fight Argos and Athens at once. She also suspected that some cities in the Peloponnese of intending to go over to the enemy, as was indeed the case. These considerations made both sides disposed for accommodations. The Spartans being probably the most eager, as they ardently desired to recover the men taken on the island, and Spartites among those whom believed that to the first the Spartites among whom belonged to the first families, and according related to leading men of Sparta. Negotiating had begun directly after their capture, but the Athenians in the hour of triumph would not contest to any reasonable terms. Though after their defeat at Delium, Sparta, knowing that they would now be more inclined to listen at once, concluded a truce for a year, during which they were conferred as to see as long a period could be agreed upon. However, the Athenians defeated Anthropos and the deaths of Cleon and Brasidas, who had been the two principal opponents to peace on either side. The later, from the success and honor which war gave him; the former, because he thought that if tranquility were restored, his crimes would be more open to detection and his slander less credited. The foremost candidates for power in either city, Peloraxus, son of Panasius, king of Sparta, and Nicias, son of Nicothretus, the most fortunate general of his time, each desired peace more ardently than ever. Nicias, while still happy and honored, wished to secure his good fortune and to obtain a pleasant release from his trouble for himself and his countrymen, and hand down posterity and name as ever successful statesmen, politicians, and thought the way to do this was to keep out of danger and commit himself as little as possible to fortune, and that peace alone made this keeping out of danger possible. Pelorax, Pelothorax, on the other hand, was assailed by his enemies for his restoration, and regularly criticized by them in front of his countrymen for every reverse that befell them, as though his unjust restoration were the cause. They accused him and his brother Aristocles of having bribed the prophetess of Delphi to tell the Spartan deputation, which successfully arrived at the temple, to bring home the seed of the demigod, son of Zeus, from abroad. Else they would have plowed with a silver share. They would have plowed with a silver share. And they insisted that in time he had his way, induced Spartan to restore him with the same dances and sacrifices with which they had instituted their kings upon their first settlement of Sparta. This they did in the 19th year of his exile to Decretium. We had gone when banished on suspicion of having accepted a bribe to retreat from Attica, and whence he had built half his home within the consecrated precinct of Zeus for fear of the Spartans. The sting of the accusation and the reflection that in peace no disaster could occur. That when Sparta had recovered her men, there would be nothing for his enemies to seize upon. Whereas while in war while the war lasted, his highest station must always bear the scandal of everything that went wrong, made him ardently desire settlement. Accordingly, this winter was employed in conferences, and the spring reproach. The Spartans sent round orders to the cities to prepare the fortified occupation of Attica, and this held as the sword over the heads of the Athenians to induce them to listen to his overtures. And at last, many acclaimed had been urged on either side of the conferences that peace was agreed upon and the following basis. Each party was to restore their conquest, but Athens was to keep Nitria, her demand for Plataea being countered by the Thebans asserting that they had acquired the place not by force or treachery, but by voluntary accession upon agreement of the citizens, and at the same time, according to the Athenian account, being the history of her acquisition of Nicrias. This arranged the Spartans, some of the allies, and all voting for peace except the Boeotians, Croatians, and Elythians and Megarians, who did not approve of these proceedings. They concluded the treaty and made peace, each of the contracting parties swearing the following articles. And this is the Athenians and Sparta and allies make a treaty to swear it to a city, swear it city by city as follows. Regarding the natural temples, there shall be a free passage by land and by sea, To all those who wish to sacrifice, travel, consult, and attend the oracles or games according to the customs of their countries. The temples and shrines of Apollo at Delphi and the Delphians shall be governed by their own laws, taxed by their own city, and judged by their own judges, and the land and the people according to the customs of their country. The treaty shall be binding for 50 years upon the Athenians and the allies of the Athenians, and upon the Spartans and the allies of the Spartans, without fraud or harm by land or sea. It shall not be lawful to take up arms with the intent to do injury either to the Spartans or her allies against the Athenians or their allies, or the Athenians and their allies against the Spartans and their allies, or in any way means whatsoever, but should by any difference arise between them, they are to have recourse to law and oaths according as may both agreed by the parties. The Spartans and allies gave back Antipolis to the Athenians. Nevertheless, in the case of the cities given up the Spartans to the Athenians, the inhabitants shall be allowed to go where they please to take their property with them, and the cities shall be independent, paying only tribute to Aristes. And it shall And it should not be lawful for the Athenians or their allies to carry on war against them after the treaty had been concluded, so long as the tribute is paid. The city referred to are Agurus, Detrus, and Acrates, Styloris, Elothium, and Spartulus. These cities shall be neutral, allies neither of the Spartans or the Athenians, but if the cities consent, it shall be lawful for the Athenians to make them their allies, provided always that the cities wish it. The Methoberanians, the Cenarians, and the Sagittarians shall inhabit their own cities, but the as also the Orlathian and the Arcadians. But the Sparta and their allies shall give back Panactium to the Athenians. The Athenians shall give back Corinthium, Coryphanos, Corinthium, Metia, Petraea, and Atlantia to the Spartans, but also the Spartans that are in the prison at Athens or elsewhere in the Athenian dominion shall be let go to the Peloponnesian. That shall be let go to the Peloponnesian besieged and Syrian and others in Syrian and to the allies of the Spartans, and all whom Brasidas sent there, and any other allies of the Spartans that have to be in prison in Athens or anywhere in the Athenian domain. The Spartans and their allies shall in like manner give back any of the Athenians or their allies that they may have in their hands. In the case of Cylon, Theralon, and Sulam, and the place that the Athenians may have, the Athenians may adopt such measures as they please. The Athenians shall take an oath to the Spartans and their allies city by city. Every man shall swear as by the most binding oath of his country, 17 of each of city. The oaths shall be as follows: I will abide by this agreement and treaty honestly and without deceit. In the same way, the oath shall be taken by Spartans and their allies and the Athenians. And the oath shall be renewed annually by both parties. Pillars shall be erected at Olympia and Pythia, Isium, and Athens, in the Acropolis, and Sparta, and the Temple of Eclea. If anything be forgotten, what it be ever, on any point, it shall be consistent with the oath for both parties. The Athenians and the Spartans, to alter it according to their discretion. The treaty begins from the Epherit of Pytharas of Sparta on the 27th day of the month of Artemisinum, from the archonship of Lysias in Athens on the 25th day of the month of Elebonium. Those who took the oath and poured the libations of the Spartans were Piloraxus, Aegis, Piloteres, Demagtius, uh, Chionis, Megagenis, um, Anacretus, Dietus, Ecastagoras, Pilocantus, Zeusidas, uh, Anatippus, Tellus, um, Al, Al, Elsa, Alcinides, Ades, Epidanes, Menes, Lephilos, and for the Athenians, Lampon, Isamonikos, Nicias, Laches, Eurodemos, uh, uh, Pet, Proles, Pythagoras, Hamagon, Myth, Myth, Mer, Merithlus, Thras, Thracic, Thrasicles, Terragenes, Aristocrates, Ilotes, Timocrates, Eleon, Lacamentus, and Demosthenes. The treaty was made in the spring, and just at the end of winter, when the city, after the festival of Dionysus, just 10 years, with the difference of a few days from the first invasion of Attica and the commencement of the war. This must be calculated by the season rather than by trusting to the emirations of the names of the various magistrates or officers of honors that are used to mark past events. Accuracy is impossible where in any event may occur at the beginning or middle or any period in the tenure of office. But by computing by summer and winter, the method adopted in this history, it will be found that each of these amounts to half a year. There were 10 summers and as many winters contained in the this first war. Uh, um, let's continue to 20. Meanwhile, the Spartans, to whose lot it fell to begin the work of restitution, immediately set free all the prisoners of the war and their possessions, and sent Isomacles, Manion, and Philocrates as envoys to the cities in the Thracian region, in order Clarides to hand over Antipolis to the Athenians and the rest of their allies, each to accept the treaty as effective. The allies, however, did not like its terms and refused to accept it. Clarides, also wishing to oblige the Claudians, would not hand over the city, declaring he could not do so against their will. Meanwhile, he hastened in person to Sparta with envoys from the place to defend his disobedience against the possible accusation of Icagoras and his companions, and also to see whether it was too late for the agreement to be altered. On finding the Spartans were bound, quickly he sent back with instructions from them to hand over the place, if possible, or at all events to bring out the Peloponnesians that were in it. The allies happened to be present in person at Sparta, and those who had not accepted the treaty were not asked by the Spartans to adopt it. This, however, they refused to do for the same reasons as before, unless a fairer one than the present one agreed to, and remaining firm in their determination, were dismissed by the Spartans, who now decided to form an alliance with the Athenians, thinking that Argos, who had refused the application of Epidanes and Lechius for the renewal of the treaty, would without Athens be no longer be formidable, and the rest of the Peloponnesian would likely keep quiet if the desired alliance of Athens were shut against them. Accordingly, their conference with the Athenians ambassadors, an alliance was agreed upon and oaths were exchanged upon the following terms. The Spartans shall be allies of the Athenians for 50 years, Should any enemy invade the territory of Sparta or injure the Spartans, the Scythians will help them as in such way as most effective as can, according to their power. But if such invaders is no longer there any after plundering of the country, the cities shall be the enemy of Sparta and Athens, and shall be chastised by both, and no one shall make peace without the other. This it will be performed honestly, loyally, without fraud. Whomever any enemy invade the territory of Athens and injures the Athenian, and the Spartan shall help them in any way the most effective can, according to their power. But if the invaders is no longer there after the plundering of the country, and that the city shall be the enemy of Sparta and Athens, and each shall be and chastised by both, no one shall make peace without the other. This is to be performed honestly, loyalty without fraud. There should the slave population rise, the Athenians shall help the Spartans with all their might, according to their power. This treaty of alliance shall be sworn by the same persons on either side that swore the other treaty, and it shall be renewed annually by the Spartans and the Athenians for the Asara and the Athenians to Sparta for the Hyacytherians, and in a pillar shall be set up in either by either party at Sparta near the statue of Apollo, at Amyclea in Athens on the Acropolis near the statue of Athena. Should the Spartans and the Athenians see fit to add or take away from the alliance in any particular, it shall be consistent with their oaths of both parties to do so according to their discretion. To those who took the oath of the Spartans, and he gives the name again: Parallaxus, Aegeus, Parallaxus, Philotelius, Damagatus, Cheontis, Megagenes, Arcantus, Dathius, Isogoras, Philocardantas, Zeusaris, Anthipus, Antichilus, Tellus, Amphidas, Menes, and Lampus for the Athenians, Lampon, Isomachus, Laches, Nicias, Euthydemus, Patrocles, Philodoros, Hemagon, Myrtilus, Theresiocles, Theagenes, Aristocracies, Iolicus, Timocrates, Leon, Lachemus, and Demosthenes. This alliance um, was made not long after the treaty, and the Athenians gave back the men of the island. The Spartans in the summer of the 11th year began. This completes the history of the first war, which occupied the whole of the previous 10 years. After the treaty and the alliance between the Spartans and the Athenians concluded, after the 10-year war and the effort of Polites of Sparta, the archonship of Aclius in Athens, the cities which had accepted this agreement were at peace. But the Corinthians and some other cities of the Peloponnesians tried to disturb the settlement, immediately agitated against Sparta. Moreover, Athens, as time went on, began to suspect the Spartans because they had not performed some of the provisions of the treaty. And although for 6 years and 10 months they abstained from invasion from each other territory, they yet abroad an undisturbable armistice did not prevent either party from doing serious injury until they were finally obliged to break the treaty made after 10 year war, and to recourse to open hostilities. So this is and this at this time. So we're going to stop here. We end this winter of the 10th year with the peace treaty being set up and agreements to this. Uh, it was kind of agreed to in the beginning of things, and now it's clearly agreed to here. Uh, we stop here at this thing. For any comments or questions, please put it below in the comments. I will answer, respond to it. Please like if you liked it. If you have any and passion, share it with a friend. Want to do subscribe, and if you know people would be interested, pass it on to them. Pass the website, pass the my channel on to them. If you want to follow me on social media, the information is below. And if you want to help me, you want to contribute to this, you can do so by subscribe star or Patreon. Okay, thank you very much, and have a nice day.